You know that bit in Lord of the Rings where Frodo's just absolutely had enough? He's exhausted, his body's giving out, and he hasn't slept in days. The ring has drained every drop of hope from his sturdy little body, and he looks over at Sam and... he's done. Even if he wants to continue, he just can't. And then Samwise the Brave takes up the gauntlet and carries the ring bearer that last bit of the way. Because there is hope in this world, damn it, and I may not be able to carry it, but I can carry you! That's love right there. That's devotion. Not just to his friend, but also to the world. I really love Sam and Frodo because they're perfectly complementary and keep each other going no matter the cost. When it comes to post-apocalypse or end-of-the-world type scenarios, it's often framed as you keep going no matter the personal cost. But I find that most interesting when the world can only be saved through that personal cost specifically. How much is your life worth? Is it more than anyone else's? Of course you'd say no. Except, what happens if you're told that your life actually is worth more than others? Pretty uncomfortable, except there's a catch. You have a responsibility now. You don't get to pout about it. Or what if you're never told and it slowly dawns on you that you're the one who can make a difference? Is this a blessing or a curse? Does your answer change if you've been raised and groomed for this one purpose? What does that say about your caretakers, your friends, your decisions thus far? Do you even have free will? Well, don't worry about it. Be a good little lamb. Lie down on the altar. So, you're the saviour of the world. What do you do? For me, I'd embrace my duty and put in the work, but I'd resent whoever put me in this situation. Who decided this for me? Who had the right? I couldn't live with myself if I chose to walk away, so I'd put one foot in front of another, do my good deed, and sacrifice myself for the good of humanity. And I'd hate it. But I believe it was the right choice. Maybe I'm an optimist, but I think most people would do the same. That belief in doing what's right is key here, and I don't mean belief as in religion. It's easiest to care about something huge and abstract, such as the fate of the world, if you can chunk that struggle down and graft it onto your own personal bubble. We're really bad at caring about big, shapeless things we can't touch, and the longer that goes on for, the harder it gets to care and conceptualize. We're all sitting around and trying to think about the shape of the monster that has too many parts to see. We struggle to truly engage with things on a global scale, and I've touched on this in my apocalypse video. But we don't exist on that grand scale. You exist here. When times get hard, Frodo thinks of the Shire and his friends. Don't worry about the book ending, it's fine. No, don't look at it. The Last of Us Ellie thinks of the good of everyone else who could be cured of the zombie infection. Thanks, Joel. And Katniss Everdeen becomes a symbol for the sake of the districts, even if she hates it, because it's right. Within the narrative, these characters all have a choice though. While they're the perfect people for the task, the events of their lives have led up to this and informed their decisions. They see the world deteriorating and hang on to the things that are good and are worth fighting for. They're allowed to have nuance and have more facets to their character, and actually their stories wouldn't work with a one-dimensional do-gooder at the helm. That sacrificial hero has to be someone who's more than just mindless duty. They have to care. And it's that compassion and past experience that makes their single-minded belief to put one foot in front of another engaging and worth watching. We care about this character because, despite it all, they've decided that this is worth it. Maybe you want to kill the six-fingered man who murdered your father. Maybe you want to take down the government. Maybe you just want everything to stay saved for 5 damn minutes. The bit I get stuck on, the bit that really bakes my noodle and makes me sit and chew on it for a while, is when somebody's duty is sacrifice. When your story is based on the character caring, with a will, a dream, and a hope to protect, it's a sacrifice. When your protagonist is an empty shell, or was groomed for the purpose without the ability to question their value, is it still a sacrifice? How far? How similar? In every sense? That's what drew me to Ender Lilies and Hollow Knight, both with silent protagonists created for a purpose, laid on your life to cure the evils of the world. Both are bound by duty and given bodies designed for their task, but only one has a mind, or at least that we can see. Both absorb afflictions into themselves even before they die. They're created to cure the world, not to be people, and yet I found myself growing extremely attached to both of them. That's what I want to chew on with you today. While as the player, you can screw around eternally. The narrative says there's doom on the horizon, so you better make a decision quickly. Part 1. Soul Corruption. Let's start with a character who's a living sacrifice, but has no mind to think, no will to break, no voice to cry suffering. In Hollow Knight, you're a knight who is hollow. Clever, I know. But you're not the Hollow Knight. You're another attempt at them. Stick with me here. Hollow Knight is a precision platformer, Metroidvania, insert jargon term here, game, with a blank slate protagonist to project yourself onto. Narratively, this is wonderful, as you become the sacrificial lamb who's fought and died and died and died to get through the game. This adventure works incredibly when you're the one who's overcome a myriad of challenges, charting your own way through labyrinthine abandoned civilizations. You meet the people, see the places that used to house thousands, now populated by husks. You'll meet all sorts of different bugs on your journey, as you map out the world with Nail and Quill in... hand? Paw? What are bug hands called? Tarsus! I'm not calling it that. Each area is characterful, enchanting, and beautifully scored by the composer Christopher Larkin, with each area having a unifying underlying theme. Everything is part of the kingdom. It's one hive, one life, one body. Every bug in Hallownest was elevated and given intelligence and sentience by a higher being called the Pale King. Every bug except for you. You're not natural. You seemingly come from outside. Our journey begins as we hop down the howling cliffs, nailing Tarsus, ready for adventure. You're not given a name or personality. You're just presented with a sign that says, "Higher beings, these words are for you alone." This has a meaning within the lore, but the message is also clearly for you, the player. You just picked up this game and you see what's clearly a tutorial sign giving you a direction and a hint at the story. We can read it, though we can't understand the bug language. We are the higher being that moves the night. They're literally our avatar. We move through it. When you get attached to the world, you end up attaching to the way you interact with it. The night is just a shell, a vessel, and this is reflected in the game mechanics. See that orb in the top left? When you hit another creature, you absorb part of its soul, which you can use to heal yourself or cast spells. You don't get a soul of your own, but you do get to siphon off the life of other bugs and fill up your little cup with it, sipping that sweet, sweet life essence. Investigating around the subtly named Soul Sanctum lets us know that soul animates our bodies. And if you've seen my Near Alchemy videos, that should be ringing some bells. If not, don't worry about it, but if so, this is the bit I referred to as spirit, that fluid that lets the body and brain talk to each other and carries messages back and forth, or what we know to be electrical impulses in the nervous system in the modern day. We're only working with a pair in this game, body and soul, so I am technically overcomplicating here, because I love playing with alchemical connections, but the important part is that hitting something enough times to suck out that soul means it dies. Though that does tend to happen if you put a blade through someone. Unfortunate side effect. This is where your cute little buggy body comes in. You're hollow. I mean, it's in the title, Hollow Knight. But you're there to carry something, an empty vessel, our soul sugar bowl, but because of that, you can't really be anything. You have no personality and no real soul as such. Instead, you have a little shade that pops out and sings to you in absence of a body, trying to lure you back to carry it. Somehow, your body can shuffle along quite happily without the shade, but your container can only half fill if there's not something similar to it inside you, perhaps to reflect that old magical principle of like calls to like. Trying to produce an effect means you need to do something equivalent and thematically linked, something symbolically expressive. It's not so much irrational as non-rational, like using a plant that looks like an ear to treat an ear infection, regardless of what the plant is actually made of. Humans like patterns. But that's going to unspool into a very long tangent, so I'll stop here. Ask me about it on stream or something. My point is, the shade seems to be of a similar substance to the soul. Perhaps not a different version of it, but similar enough that it allows that soul to assimilate with the knight's body, like a little soul coffee filter. In order to use that soul and do something with it, you need to focus, either sending it around your body to heal it, or sending it outwards as a spell. All the magic in this game comes by focusing your soul, and it depletes your supply as it's projected towards your enemies. Interestingly, the knight isn't the only one who can manipulate soul. The Soul Sanctum is also filled with the remnants of bugs that tried to harness the power of life itself, but found that their minds became obstacles to this, as there's a tablet here that says, "The mind still limits us so. How to break past its constraints? To attain a pure focus, is it even possible?" It could be that the way the Pale King expanded the minds of Halonessians doesn't stretch that far, like a concentrated territory of influence where they revert back to their base selves if they left. Or maybe he didn't want them to become so intelligent that they began to question their place in the world. The Soul Sanctum is also filled with goopy little ghosts, phantoms of twisted up souls that manifest to chase you around. I want to think that they're attracted to the knight somehow and chasing after them, instinctively trying to fill that empty void and create a balance of flesh and soul again. But pretty much every enemy in the game behaves similarly, so that's probably not the case. The bestiary refers to these ghostly creatures as mistakes and follies, and they've managed to warp their own bodies through what the bestiary refers to as meddling with the soul of other creatures, causing them to lose their shape. Now they skulk through the shadows of their sanctum like slugs, hoping their old brothers will build them new bodies. They seem to still have some innate desires though, wanting that flesh back, held back by their mind. They're not hollow, but also definitely not in control. The knight was deliberately created to have no mind or will. As I said earlier, they were created with no mind to think, no will to break. With no mind or will, spellcasting comes easily to it once it learns how to cast spells. Though, what does learn mean to a creature with no mind? Of course, on the game screen you just absorb the little icon that zoops into your body, but I wonder if the knight can sense a change at all. How conscious is it? How does it process new information, or is it just a case of, yes, I have the thing that allows me to perform X action? Maybe it's a fragment of soul that knows how to perform the action, that once absorbed by the knight comes with understanding, similar to the Portiers in the book Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky. Other books did manage to learn magic, but it seems it required far more effort and would likely be imperfect, something that needed a high level of study alongside a partial relinquishment of will, allowing their own soul to flow through their body in a guided but simultaneously free fashion. No wonder they went mad. The Plague in Hollow Knight is also fascinating to me, not just because of its goopy nature, but because it seems to be another soul-like fluid. It fills the insects' bodies and moves them around, filling them with a dream. While this is not a lore video, this is a theme and concept video, there's another additional pressure in our body-soul equation here, and it's the idea of the dream. Back before the Pale King expanded the minds of the bugs and made them sentient in what became Halonest, the area was ruled by another higher being called the Radiance, who lived in the realm of dreams and created the Moth tribe from her light. When the Pale King arrived, everyone turned their backs on the Radiance and worshipped the Pale King instead. Rather than soul as a life force, she was primarily concerned with dream essence, which animates the mind. With the dream nail, you can read thoughts. When people began to forget about her, she fought back. She infects people's minds so that their thoughts will turn to her. But perhaps because of the Pale King's expansion of their mind, this unfortunately consumes their thoughts and overwrites them entirely. It's almost like a system overload, unable to be contained when it's touched too many thoughts. Truly, the knight is winning by being the epitome of no thoughts head empty. These Radiance touch bodies become feral and twisted, attacking any non-infected, likely in an attempt to spread that belief in a rabid fervour. There's only the drive to seize, to grab, to bite, to kill. That one is not like me. Stamp it out. Either the enemy dies or becomes infected too, whether alive or as a reanimated corpse, the dream plague serving as that animating soul instead of the usual white goo. Simply by being in Halonest, it corrupts the minds of the living and thinking, as we see with Myla, her voice wavering as that link between the song her mind knows and her physical mouth singing gets interrupted by plague, the role this game's soul would fill. Even when her mind is going, we can see her will being overwritten. If you dream nail the Radiance and read her thoughts, she says, "Ancient enemy, because we are made of void, of absence, of hollowness." Now, let's contrast that with Ender Lilies, another something-something Metroidvania with approximately the same narrative arc. You explore a plague-ridden world, honing your skills and playing as a character who is created to be sacrificed. Except this time, it's different. Lily isn't a blank slate. She's an entire person, but only we as the players really get to see that. To most of the world, she's just another white priestess to be sacrificed, interchangeable with any other. She's there to play her role and represents a particular set of abilities. Only the player and the dead recognize her as a person. Lily's inner strength and personal growth is reflected in the mechanics too. Where Hollow Knight's protagonist's damage output and survival is based on player skill alone, their progression is completely static. They can pick up new spells or upgrade their sword, but the knight itself doesn't develop or improve with practice. They either have that ability to use, or they don't. It's black or white, yes or no. It's about how you control them. But Lily can level up. She can get stronger, take more hits and deal more damage. She's not hollow. She's learning, she's growing, and the world is telling her to sacrifice herself. Take the corruption into your body, make yourself sick, and give up your life for the greater good. And Lily can say no. The blight falls from the sky as endless rain, engulfing the land. Our protagonist, Lily, is born with the power to purify the blight, ready to inherit the duties of the previous white priestess, her mother, Freesia. Lily is driven forward by duty, responsibility, goodness, and fear. The way she purifies the blight, however, is by absorbing it and taking it into her own body and sacrificing her own health and well-being. This actively hurts her, but she's willing to hold all of the poison. It's what she was born to do, and despite being an amnesiac, I think on some level she immediately understands this. With each person you purify, you get an insight into their memories and what they were trying to protect before their death. And one of the earliest memories is of Lily and Freesia helping the knight you've just put down, and hearing him praying not to cause this child any further pain. When madness takes me, will this little one be made to carry the burden, Jared wonders, slumped on the floor after fighting for his village. A village that fears what I have become. As much like the Soul Sanctum scholars, he allowed others to experiment with his body and soul, and drank a deathless elixir to become an immortal knight in hopes of forcing his body to hold out for longer and keep fighting. His boss theme is called Helplessness, which really underlines the suffering he endured for others, becoming an inspiration, and later, a martyr. In Ender Lilies, everyone seems to be sacrificing pieces of themselves day by day to help others make it to the next. It's a far more solemn game than Hollow Knight in tone, but there's still hope in choice for Lily. The world is doomed, but she chooses to care and keep going, sticking to her post despite her fragility and fear, and that makes her incredibly strong. Her sacrifice, in my humble opinion, means more than the knight's, as she has a mind to choose with, and every time she chooses to continue. Now, obviously she's been forced into this position, and probably doesn't have many better options, but this is a story. She's a vehicle to take the player forward and build that connection to the world, just like the knight is. And she's made both stronger and weaker by having that mind to contend with. Lily's easiest ending, and the one I stumbled into first, is her leaving the kingdom alone, blight continually spreading but able to be outrun by her, letting her grow up unburdened. I don't treat that as canon, however, because Lily spends her entire journey healing everyone she meets. Even bodies that are now just husks, she treats kindly and releases the suffering minds trapped inside. Yeah, if the blight gets you and corrodes you badly enough, you'll lose your mind, but will still be conscious enough to be in pain and pray for release trapped inside a non-functional body. Unless this small child happens to find you and takes it on herself. Yikes. With all of the religious imagery of churches, sacrifice, and our innocent, white-coloured lamb-to-the-slaughter protagonist, there are some very Christian-feeling ideals in this one. But honestly, anything with a suffering, sacrificial protagonist could be read that way. I feel Ender Lilies leans into that iconography really successfully, and it adds to the gothic flair of the world, whilst treating the core role of priestess as someone who loves their flock unwaveringly. However, religion isn't really the story here, it's the values that are important. It's the kindness, the choices, the care, and the weight of the world on this poor child that make it work. Taking on blight physically changes Lily, staining her white hair and eventually beginning to mutate her body as tentacles start peeking through it. By bearing the weight of humanity, she becomes something else, something other, but she does it anyway. White priestesses can survive blight without going mad, as it doesn't affect their souls, only their bodies, which they can purify later. But it is absolute agony to carry. As previously mentioned, there's some odd things that can happen to the body here. The blight can fuse people together, the most obvious example of this being our fast travel buddy, Bale. He was a driver for the priestesses, ferrying them to different villages, who became fused with his horse, but the memory of their shared work together means they still try to serve their purpose and carry Lily around. There's some lingering body memory of what their routines were and the roads they took, some imprint that life left on him. The Umbral Knight comments that he senses no clear mind within the pair, but that the horse and carrier seem to be drawn to Lily's amulet. Even without his head, Bale still manages to show up for work. Give that man a raise! The military also tried to take advantage of this and create monsters fused with humans in order to have more powerful fighters, or taking those deathless elixirs that Jared did to make him an immortal knight, but... well, you can probably guess how that went. Considering that the blight drives you insane with some physical and psychological torture into the bargain, and that the elixir needs you to have a little bit of humanity left in you to work, so no using it on anyone who's already too far gone, it really sealed the kingdom's fate. Good job! Now you have agonized dragons who hate you specifically. The plague seems to allow soul melding, sharing, translation, and transmutation, but again, the root of all this experimentation is care. Faden, a scientist who we never meet, worked deep down in the verboten, or forbidden domain, to try and cure the blight without everyone having to rely purely on the priestesses. In trying to ease Frisia's burden, now Lilies, he created the Deathless Elixir. I'm reminded of the short story, The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas by Ursula K. Le Guin. In that story, humanity's created a true utopia where everyone's happy and life is perfect. The price of this utopia is that one child must be chosen to be locked away in the dark and forced to suffer all kinds of humiliation, pain, and strife. Every citizen, when coming of age, must visit this wretched child and look at them, face to face, and choose to either stay in Omelas or walk away. And in Ender Lilies, it's actually Faden's idea to create that child of Omelas. It's his fault that Lily even exists to act as this child. In order to ease that burden, he comes up with the idea of cloning a dying Frisia, giving new children the abilities that her body naturally has, using her body like an asexual plant. There's plenty of floral imagery in the game, from Lily's name to the flowers we can restore prayers from, but the ending song is also titled Bulbul, as in small bulbs a flowering plant produces to create offspring. Faden's work to create artificial life literally aims to guide a spirit into the new baby's body, inheriting the power but having control over their own body. Lily becomes a floral clone and spiritual offshoot of Frisia, in body, spirit, and legacy. Faden cared deeply about Frisia, but in doing so he created children to die in agony in her place, as many times as was necessary in a last-ditch attempt to stop the whole world's suffering. I almost wish we'd met him in the story. Would he dare look Lily in the face? He also dooms his lab assistant, Muriel, as she's infected with blight while working with him in the plague-ridden verboten domain. She doesn't blame him, and leaves him a tender note saying she knew the risks. And surprisingly, it's her mutated form that's the boss of this area, not his. When she became infected, poor Muriel was pregnant, so Faden attempted to shift her soul into the baby, which transforms the fused pair into a monster, her butterfly wings perhaps symbolising rebirth. And when she's close to death, a music box begins to play, underscoring the horror of mother and child being put to rest. Her boss title is Muriel, the Beloved, but she couldn't be saved. Everyone in this world who tries to save another out of love seems to add just a little more torment to it, but again, the love is there. The desire to help, to save, to hold someone close, and it's a damn tragedy. She never attacked Faden after her mutation either. That lasting bit of love is still there. Because of the two mixed souls, Lily can't even purify her when she's put down, which I think was the most horrifying thing to me. Her body in the resulting cutscene pinned to a spider's web, mirroring her entrapment in an intricately complex plot. Poor Muriel. Both Hollow Knight and Ender Lily's worlds are willing to sacrifice their children to restore a kingdom, to stave off the plague and fix their mistakes. However, the nature of those born for the purpose entirely changes the feel of how they go about it. Part 2. Recognition. Both our protagonists are small, cute, and soft-looking. Hollow Knight's deliberately rounded designs automatically lend an air of cuteness to the bugs, so even if you're not an insect kind of person, you're probably not going to have much of a problem with this little one. Look at them, they're so squishable. All the other bugs respond to the Knight as if it's a person, and most tend to be kind towards it, even if it never says anything in return. It took me a while to realise how empty the Knight was on a physical level as well, thanks to always being on the move. But you have no idle animations at all. Other bugs are usually doing something, or moving very slightly, but the Knight is stock still unless you're tilting the analog stick. When the Knight wakes up somewhere that isn't a bench, it just lies face down on the floor, completely motionless until you poke it. It's actually a little eerie once you've clocked it. The Knight can't be allowed to have willpower because then it might lose it. It can't have confidence or it might break. Having free will, values, determination might not be enough. And they can't afford to pin the world's salvation on a creature that has the capacity to break. It's cruel, but perhaps it's more cruel to let a being be cognizant of that weight and pressure. The vessels before you have all failed, including the real, titular Hollow Knight. He gains sentience, and when there's a soul, when there's a mind, that mind can be influenced, broken, enchanted, ensnared. They couldn't contain the radiance when they could be influenced by them, no matter how badly they wanted to. During their boss fight they scream, stabbing themselves repeatedly through the abdomen, knowing they're dying and desperately trying to stop themselves being puppeted by the radiance, praying you can do what they could not. What should have given their sacrifice meaning, their choice in the matter, made them fail, and I find that fascinatingly tragic. Usually in stories that's the emotional gut punch, but here the lack of it seems to hurt all the more, and that takes some skill to pull off. The Knight likely isn't just a tool to the player by that point, but they must function like one. That's my assumption, of course. Different players think differently, but there's one person who definitely values the Knight. Hornet. Hornet tests you twice, checking your skill and worth. She's likely done this hundreds of times with hundreds of vessels, hundreds of little failed siblings. But she sees this one get closer and closer to the truth, to their objective, whether they understand it or not, and dares to hope that perhaps this time, this one will be different. She nicknames this little ghost and repeats it throughout the game, including when we go to fight the final boss. She insists she won't be helping, but assists at the critical moment, allowing us to break into the Hollow Knight's dreams where the Radiance's form is trapped. He's been mostly able to hold her back, but it won't be long until his shell shatters under the pressure. By becoming a person, eventually his will fail. By calling us Ghost, Hornet recognises that emptiness in us, our ethereal empty shell, but she still cares about the Knight. She sets you apart from the others that have come before you, all of the King's failed attempts. By naming it, she grants our personhood. She recognises you. Lily too doesn't technically have a name until near the game's end, and only if you pick up a piece of paper from another child priestess's corpse. Beyond her purpose as a plague cure, she doesn't have much of a sense of identity as she wakes with amnesia. While she's named as Lily in your menu from the start, we see her actively decide to borrow this dead girl's name. Unlike the Knight, her name's used later to grant her personhood. In Ending C, Freesia uses her name, and says that it was the time she spent with her children, and not the using of the blight they could grant that truly saved her. Freesia says that, "You are never just a clone of myself. You're your own person, Lily. You've grown so much." She looks at Lily and sees a girl, not a tool. Freesia lived a similar experience to Lily, but where Lily's thrust into the midst of it, having to trudge through the pain while discovering the state of the world, Freesia spent her whole life crushed under the weight of expectations, and it slowly killed her inside. She actually tries to use her innate love and care to drive her forwards in her healing work, her duty, but she attaches all of her value to her job. Performing the purification brings joy back to the people. I must continue, if only to be of that small service. I thought I was useless, but they need me, as long as I'm the White Priestess. Eventually, after experiencing bucket loads of psychological trauma from purifying people on a battlefield, her hands begin to go numb. Her physical body can't bear the strain, and I wouldn't be surprised if she began to emotionally shut down as well. People talk about her producing an heir, within earshot no less, and Freesia's appalled at how brazen they are at treating her as a means to an end, even though I have no desire of birthing a child. She becomes viewed as an additional type of vessel, one for carrying children. In the end, she longs to be spirited away, even if only temporarily, by some kind soul. And I find the word kind here very telling. It's not kindness if it's wrung from you drop by drop and you can't say no. But she's trying to put kindness behind her actions and her healing, trying to view it as purely positive. We see from the Mad Warrior Ulf that even under the worst circumstances, Frisia put others first, and not just in a rigid and dutiful way. She sat with him after a weeks-long battle, exhausted from purifying soldiers, and met him where he was on the ground, telling him the names of the flowers surrounding them. She took his fear of talking with others and treated him warmly, telling him about the world beyond the military and giving him some perspective and some reason to connect to this place. We fight him in that same field, even in his blighted state still guarding the flowers they shared that day, albeit now stained red with plague. We can see those flowers throughout the tower, both growing wild and placed deliberately in vases, perhaps traces of Frisia's stay here. Another young priestess is found at the top of the second tower, Frisia's firstborn, her replacement. She wonders in a memo whether her sisters are still down below, hoping that her mother will return soon, lonely and frightened at this huge responsibility imparted by the king who doesn't care about her. And I'm not projecting or inferring here. Once the king is overcome with blight, he outright says to his captain that the priestess and knights who gave their lives for the kingdom were disposable. He prioritizes his own survival on a futile quest for immortality, encouraging further experiments on subjects he could paint as sinners, using them to play with the boundaries of body and soul. The sacrifices Frisia and her children made are dismissed. She's a means to an end to her ruler, but to those whose lives she touches, she makes it all bearable. If you double back to break through a pustulant barrier into Ulf's room, there's a handmade snowdrop bracelet, woven from the wintry flowers on the battlefield, which is imbued with prayers of a knight from the fort. Ulf poured all his love and hope into this, and though it couldn't save Frisia, that protective symbol of kindness is passed to Lily. Flowers and hope need care to blossom. Frisia desperately wants that kindness she embodies to be extended to her, and people do genuinely love her and care for her, but often it boils down to how they can help her as a priestess. They're being useful and serving her the way she serves them, but they're not connecting on the personal, human level. These acts of kindness often take them away from her side, locked away in research labs when she needs them with her. She becomes Frisia the priestess rather than Frisia the person. That chipping away at her personhood, alongside the regular blight being absorbed into her body, eventually overwhelms her, body and soul. That's why the blight manifests as rain. She can't stop crying. Lily, however, can express her preferences and shows fear and pain through her body language. While she's silent, denied a voice, she flinches away from enemies and covers her face. She shrinks back and shivers at times when talking to the Umbral Knight, but always continues on, nodding in agreement, even when she's scared or hurt, which makes me wonder if her silence is a deliberate modification by those cloning her, or part of a natural variation within the process. You can find a note from another young priestess excited for Lily to wake up and talk to her, treating her as a new sister and loving her even before she opens her eyes, whilst being concerned that this girl won't be able to talk when she wakes up. Was she, like the knight, given no voice to cry suffering? Perhaps they learned from Frisia's slow death, or maybe her body had had too much taken from it so her clones began to wither. Perhaps she couldn't bear to hear her daughters crying anymore. We find several dead children scattered around the land, all sharing Lily's face, and gather their last wishes to help us survive, just as we find several night vessels in Hollow Night, and little shades termed siblings hovering in the abyss. Either way, poor Lily can't cry or scream or ask for help, but she chooses to fulfill this responsibility foisted on her, and keeps pushing forward the entire game. She gathers allies, and she does it through being kind, even when it's killing her. The only way to get the ending where you're spoken to and accepted by your mother while stopping the rain from falling is to scour the land for fragments of an amulet that will trigger a second phase of the final boss fight. It summons the spirits of the clone priestesses, your sisters, to sing their mother to sleep to a gentle music box. Eventually she exhausts herself and dissolves back into a human. All those sacrifices only mean anything if you and Lily put that extra work in and turn the world inside out, using every spirit and skill available to you to reach every hidden crevice and find every secret the world tucks away. You cannot stumble into this one. The effort as both player and character is what earned you that resolution, And while I often don't like collectathons as it feels like needless padding to me, if it holds narrative weight, I am all over that. It feels like you worked for this. Lily gets her freedom and someone to take care of her now, while laying her unknown sisters to rest. It feels pretty cathartic. It's not happy by any means, but neither of these games remove the weight of the sacrifices expected of and preceding our protagonists by immediately fixing all the world's problems, and that feels way more satisfying to me. There's potential there, a world that can grow with them. Hollow Knight's king is left more vague than Frisia, but again, to get a proper ending for our little bug, we have to traverse far more difficult and technically optional areas to see this through to the end. Time, attention, and above all mastery allow you to access the King Soul charm. The only way to change the knight's body and give them a void heart is by traversing down to the abyss in this world too, while carrying your maker's soul, placing it with the void heart to make you the perfect carrier. This is what allows us insight into the king and his motivations, unearthing memories of your predecessor that got too many ideas about themselves and developed a personality. A warning, perhaps? A yearning? Once you have the void heart, it becomes part of your actual body and can't be removed. You are irreversibly moulded by the treasure trail your maker left you. The item description of the charm says, "An emptiness that was hidden within, now unconstrained, unifies the void under the bearer's will. This charm is a part of its bearer and cannot be unequipped." Soul literally becomes void when you touch its origins. Light and dark don't contaminate each other, but hold each other in balance in this moment as you embrace your purpose. Only shadow can balance the searing nature of the radiance and contain it, eventually taking the shape of barbed tentacles or perhaps thorned vines, wrapping around the radiance and holding her in place. I wonder if the radiance struggles against its containment in the end, or whether it's soothed into sleep. That description of the void heart really interests me though, as your emptiness is now unconstrained. By what? Are you now a tiny, limitless black hole able to counterbalance the radiance? Immense, crushing pressure in a fragile shell? Is there the potential for you too to spread your own kind of void-flavoured corruption if things went wrong? As well as this void being under the bearer's will. We have no will. The knight can't make any decisions, they just carry out their function. Probably for the best if it can spread void all over the place, but the void down here is alive in itself, leaping up into strange animate shapes that reach for you. What have you let inside your body in place of a soul? In combining both halves of the King's soul, taken from the knight's parents respectively, and corrupting it with void, the knight becomes something like a higher being itself. This poses a logical problem, because the void heart unifies the void under the bearer's will. Except it has no will. This entire video has been about how the knight has been controlled by the player as a higher power. The knight's will is the player's will. I was going to leave the script around here originally, but then I saw the extra ending where the knight gains its own will and takes control away from the player. It says no. It won't be a sacrificial lamb. During the Absolute Radiance boss fight, the knight draws upon the power of the void and becomes a massive, overflowing void nightmare. So yeah, it turns out that even if you're the perfect little jam jar of the soul, you might be a bit on the small side. You can only access the radiance while you have the void heart, and this seals it good and proper and puts the siblings down in the abyss to rest. All those extra little vessels have served their purpose and can sleep now. However, if you decide you can't get enough of the thrill of combat, and if you become too ambitious, it awakens something in the knight. Some corrupting will, perhaps. Godhome is accessed through a dreaming worshipper, the Godseeker, and is filled with pantheons, which function like a series of boss rushes. Each has a specific lineup where you have to attune to these bosses as if feeling out a god's will, or tuning in a radio to the correct wavelength. Practically speaking, it means you need to have beaten them all before. There are some Pantheon-exclusive bosses as well, which are just as fun to fight, and you can access a sort of practice area, with increasing difficulty levels for each boss for those who love the satisfaction and accomplishment that comes with true mastery over a game. Absolute Radiance lies at the end of the hardest and longest Pantheon, deep in the mind of the dreaming Godseeker. This is the true form of the Radiance, and this seems to awaken something in the void-filled heart of the knight. Admittedly, I've not finished all of these myself, but a friend of mine who is very normal about Hollow Knight pointed me in the direction of the Pure Vessel fight. But what really struck me was the fight that followed. And what a fight! This is the pinnacle of the 43-boss-long pantheon of Hallownest. And yep, that's all of Hallownest, alright. But more importantly, the tagline says, "Seek the kingdom's forgotten light." Of course, this tells you that the Radiance is going to be the headliner here, but it does not say what you intend to do with that light once it's been found. After defeating it, you absorb its soul and drown it completely with tendrils of void, fluid pouring down from the sky in viscous, tar-like rain. In the waking world, void leaks from the eyes of the dreaming Godseeker. The void naturally opposes the light of the Radiance, and it feels as if the Godseeker's joy, or horror, at finally finding the divine is overflowing, unable to fit inside their body as they weep mucilaginous tears. Dark light radiates from them in waves. That forgotten light has become tainted and corrupt, and your body's too small to contain both the true soul of the Radiance and the Void Heart. This is the consequence of the Knight making a choice for the first time in its life. Unlike Lily, the Knight is not content to simply seal the Radiance and become a sacrificial vessel. It wants to absorb the heart of the Radiance, possess it, use it as a power source as it's done with every other soul that it's encountered with its nail. Light is not just absorbed or balanced by the Knight now, but transformed into something new. Vines in the Black Egg Temple where we fought the failed Hollow Knight turn black, the moisture inside them darkening, not withering but oozing into thick black blood. Hornet watches in horror until she readies herself for the battle against her sibling. You. Completely overtaken with void, you step towards her, louder steps than you've ever taken in your life. But still, you have no mouth and cannot scream. So, what's at the heart of all this? I picked Hollow Knight and Ender Lilies because I suppose this idea of weighing a life has been lurking in my mind since I played them. The sacrifice for the good of the whole makes me think, when is it worth it? How many innocent lives are worth sacrificing? I wonder at what point the scales tip such that it's worth it to walk away from Omelas, or create an innocent living vessel to suffer and sacrifice, and bear the weight of the world. It can be easy to shrug off the engineered situations our characters find themselves in, as a way to justify the circumstances of a video game, but I see this theme cropping up over and over again, in cycles of blood and death and time. Dark Souls heroes have to choose to reignite the flames. Signalis' Elsa keeps going to fulfill her promise, even at the dissolution of her, or perhaps all, reality. Higurashi's Rika has to choose to believe she can defeat fate. What's one soul against everything? What is a soul but everything? If you could compress the world into one tiny seed, would you plant it or swallow it whole? Lily and the Knight are born to die, shaped to fix the mistakes of the past, but as they take up their journeys, they carry both the weight of the dead sins, but also their hopes to make it better. And both our supposedly blank slate protagonists end up making their own choices, choosing what to carry. They're not bound by fate, even in the bleakest shell of a world ravaged by plague. Feels labyrinth. I don't actually know whether it's labyrinthine or a labyrinthine. It's empty and but not dead. Everything is part of the kingdom. I need to drink some squash. Ooh. Maybe it's a fragment of soul that knows how to perform the action. Fuck. Or taking those deathless elixirs. Considering that the blight. I'm reminded of the. Fuckty duck. Fuck the ducks. I'm reminded of the short story, The Ones Who Walk Away from I can't say from and then Omelas. Shit. This is gonna absolutely trip me up all the way through. Have I mentioned Freesia before then? I must have. Maybe. Let's do some Control F. Yes, I have. I thought I had. Okie dokie, you're gonna know who Freesia is. What does that say?